What's up, sports fans? It's Max Ryu again. And with this special retrospective of the 90s, I would like to especially address Mr. Bruce Blitz and all the hardcore Chicago Bulls fans who have experienced the entire Jordan era. Hey Bruce, what's up? Thanks for the shout out from a week ago. I'm more than happy to return it. So when my video about how I became an NBA fan has captivated your heart, be prepared for this one. So as I said before, I became an NBA fan right at the time in which the Chicago Bulls and Detroit Pistons rivalry has reached its climax, and my elder bro and I were lucky enough to get cable TV with screen sports that feature NBA live games on a regular basis and enable us to watch everything in English. And now I want to reflect more into detail about how the Chicago Bulls of the early 90s and their glorious three-peat have given me an unforgettable meaning in my heart as an all-time Jordan fan, and what I have gained in understanding in terms of talent development, tireless teamwork ethics, leadership qualities, tactical divisions, but most important of all, the fire and heart of a true leader in the persona of Michael Jordan. When we put it into perspective of today's NBA, that's not even a comparison. Okay, now I'm not going too much into detail of how the Bulls were built around MJ, because every lifetime Bulls fan knows that story already, so I'm getting straight to the point. So when the nucleus around Michael Jordan came together, of course, they had to find each other as a team, and that of course was a struggle that took at least 3 to 4 years. Not only with the pressure of Michael Jordan had to deal with, of just being called a one-man show, but especially the pressure for them to live up to the expectation of their ferocious leader. I will get to that aspect in a minute, but let me tell you first that among that supporting cast were Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant, who had the most talent to form a formidable, athletic starting trio with Jordan. But during their first years, their talents were really raw and still in development. John Paxson mentioned it himself. Things don't happen overnight, and you don't gel as a team all at once. The chemistry is a few years in the making, and the coaching staff was definitely patient with us. Despite their improved intensity and gain in confidence, the Chicago Bulls were not able to compete at a level of an NBA champion yet. And one of those teams that have terrorized them the most were the sworn arch rivals, the Detroit Pistons, with Isaiah Thomas, Vinnie Johnson, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, Bill Laimbeer, and co. That Bulls and Pistons rivalry was one of the most intensive that I have ever witnessed in NBA history when I think back. And the Pistons were the tormentors at their prime times, and they created what we all know as the Jordan rules. You know, guys, Michael was exactly at the same situation which most go-to guys of today's NBA are, when their supporting cast was not good enough to relieve the burden of their leader, a victim of the famous 1-on-5. You know, in the past, I recall that post-game interview of Doug Collins after Game 3 of the 1989 playoffs, in which he said, "Give the ball to Michael, everybody get the hell out of the way, and let him, Well, that was a mistake, which was punished by the Pistons' routine strategy, the Jordan rules. Wear the other Bulls down mentally and then constantly clamping down on their leader like swarming bulldogs. And it worked. Jordan and the Bulls felt the pain physically, but especially mentally. And this is where Jordan snapped at one point. Frustrated about the abilities of supporting cast, he personally took matters within the team in his own hands, so practically he said to himself, "Well, that's enough. I will make a real man out of you now." Also realizing that 1-on-5 was not the way to go, Doc Collins was relieved from his duty in the 89-90 season, and Phil Jackson became the head coach and created a system in which especially Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant became more involved, slowly getting away from that 1-on-5 system, and the results were a lot better, but still not good enough to knock off their arch rivals, the Detroit Pistons, in a legendary 7-game Eastern Conference Finals of 1990 showdown, which has left a huge strike into the heart of Michael Jordan. With his frustrations hitting the climax, Jordan suddenly exploded as a team leader. And this is the point that I'm going to emphasize into more detail now. Having read German NBA insider magazines and specials about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, I came more or less to the following assumptions. He was a beast. A relentless, tenacious, merciless, passionate, and especially explosive driver who would stop at nothing at practically grabbing his teammates by the horns. I mean, really merciless. I mean, according to those articles, just to give you a few examples, Jordan threatened Bill Cartwright to break his bones after training drills, or he yelled at Scottie Pippen to go home if he was afraid of Dennis Rodman, or in another situation he took away Horace Grant's dinner and threw it away because from his standpoint Horace didn't play well enough to deserve it. In another scenario, Will Perdue was showing some good moves in practice and Jordan yelled at him, "Why the hell don't you do something like this in a game?" But especially for B.J. Armstrong, who was still in his first 2 seasons, it was hell. Jordan would dunk on him constantly in practice and yell, "In your face!" and torment him mentally. He made B.J. Armstrong cry many times. I mean, having read all those articles, that led me to the conclusion that Jordan has practically punished his Bulls towards their first NBA championship. They suffered with him, they suffered under him. They were tortured physically and mentally in practice until one of these days they have finally developed their poise and grew stronger under his ferocious style of leadership and with the brilliance of mastermind like Phil Jackson, who knew how to deal with an individual talent with such a competitive nature of Michael Jordan. You know, at this point I would like to notify that Phil Jackson obviously was able to curb Michael's ferocious temper in practice. I mean, let me say it again, he did not try to control him, just curb him to the most acceptable limit possible in a way that everything else was under control. And Phil Jackson is the man that Michael Jordan has the most utter respect as a head coach. And in fact, he was the only coach capable of coaching Michael Jordan, in my opinion. And now you put in Mike Brown and his Archangel offense set, and if Jordan was not happy with that, bye-bye after one day. Guaranteed. You know, at this point, I would like to ask Mr. Bruce Blitz to confirm whether those past rumors were true. I mean, if that is the case, it would be one of the most heart-captivating NBA team stories that I've ever read. Anyhow, in 1991, the results of Michael's hardcore leadership and the advanced development of a motion-based half-court set offense and defense were astonishing. The Chicago Bulls have established themselves as the top contender and the legitimate favorites of the NBA crown. With their pride and developmental toughness, they have practically ripped their arch-rivals, the Detroit Pistons, apart in a humiliating sweep. I saw that Game 4 of that Eastern Conference Finals, and I felt so relieved that the Chicago Bulls have finally beaten them. As Bill Cartwright said, getting past those guys was almost like a championship, but not quite. And this is where I move on to the next chapter, breaking down the NBA Finals of 1991.